Hello Internet, Taliesin here. Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reset and... Yeah, I know. Let's be fair, we are in a lull in WoW news right now at the end of a patch. Not a long lull, obviously, because Dragonflight patch cadence goes like the absolute clappers. 10.1.7 is coming out in just a couple of weeks on September the 5th, and there are constant updates on the PTR and reveals and articles from Blizzard themselves about the patch to talk about, as well as a special report in this episode on one Christopher Metzen and exactly how much influence he is having on all of this, because I've got some information and I think it might be more than any of us thought. There's also the little tiny matter of patch 10.2, of course. Remember, the announcement for Embers of Neltharion happened before 10.07 Return to the Forbidden Reach actually launched. I don't think it's unreasonable to suspect the same might happen with the next major patch, which means we shouldn't be surprised if there is a big 10.2 reveal like this week, probably, or the week after. Put that all together, squish it up, that's a lot to get through, so let's get started. Dragon racing. We've all been enjoying the Kalimdor Cup this week, of course, because it's brilliant. And yeah, obviously I'm biased because I am the world's biggest OG dragon riding shill. But dragon racing round Kalimdor for cool transmogs? 10 out of 10, no notes. Yes, even on Goro's circuit. Apparently people really hate that one, but I didn't even know it was supposed to be extra hard until I finished my gold achievement and read everyone else crying about it on Twitter because, oh yeah, also I am the biggest OG dragon riding Chad. I even loved the horrible turgid slow-mo normal flying from race to race because a feel-inducing old zone music nostalgia tour is just what I needed, actually. Remember, this event is only on for another week and we don't know when it will be back, so if there's anything that you want from that vendor, get it now, because all of those items are going to be swapped out for new stuff when the Eastern Kingdom Cup hits in October, a 10.1.7 event. What a fantastic transition. But that's not the end of 10.1.7 Dragon Riding fun though, because in Fury Incarnate there are 2 new race modes being added to every dragon racing course. Challenge and Reverse Challenge is the same course but with no speed ups or vigor recharge blobs. In other words, pure unfiltered dragon racing, which I am genuinely incredibly excited about, because if there's one thing dragon riding lacked, it was this: elitism. Basically, zero sugar, pure grain organic challenge racing is now the only dragon racing there is, separating the men from the boys, the wheat from the chaff. Imagine using a vigor recharge blob for my luck. And also from the courses I've tested on the PTR, the timers are quite forgiving and it's just an excuse to go and do all the races again. So yeah, that's a 10 out of 10. No notes. More 10.1.7. Blizzard dropped 3 big Battle.net articles this week on some of the patch's biggest features: Forsaken and Night Elf Heritage Armor, Dreamsurges, and the Secrets of Azeroth event, which technically isn't a 10.1.7 feature specifically, but does run into 10.1.7. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, mostly because we know absolutely nothing about it. Well, until now, because thanks to this Blizzard blog post, we now know a little bit about it, and it sounds brilliant. Uncover who is behind a recent string of artifact thefts through a variety of daily clues. Ooh, exciting. Keep your eyes peeled for daily secrets and tantalizing new rumors. Ooh, don't mind if I do. Play a little Follow the Leader with some of your favorite community creators to discover some of the secrets Azeroth has to offer. Oh no, f*** off. I'm joking. That's just my little joke, a tiny little joke. I'm sure that bit will be brilliant. Actually, I'm sure it'll be the best bit. That's the bit I'm looking forward to the most. I bet you are too. But one thing we do know is the rewards. A cool mecha hat thing, a torch toy, a key weapon, and a dog wearing a deerstalker, and an alpaca wearing a deerstalker, and a deerstalker. So you don't have to feel left out when you're hanging with your new mountain dog. I'm guessing that all those arrows that appeared around Valdrakken one day on the PTR will have something to do with this event. And maybe the Arcane Forge, which likewise appeared and disappeared within within a couple of days on there. But otherwise, it all is genuinely a mystery, and I'm low-key excited for it. We also got a talk through of the new Primal Storms. I mean, Storm Surges. I mean, the Grand Hunt. I mean, the Researchers event. I mean, Suffusion Camps. I mean, Time Rift. Dream Surges. I mean, Dream Surges. You know what I mean. And what are Dream Surges? Well, they're another one of those Dragonflight open world events. You know the ones I mean. But where on the Dragonflight world event scale will they land? Right up the top with Time Rifts, an enjoyable, varied romp, rich in lore and fun narrative with a smorgasbord of easily targetable rewards? Or will they be more Primalist Tomorrow? Fine to dip into every now and then when you've got a new alt to gear, but ultimately so forgettable that you never even noticed I left them out of the initial list. Dragonflight loves its world events, doesn't it? And this one does have some cool features, like the voting for what buff will be up during the next Dreamsurge. And they're every 30 minutes, voting using the green splobs that you can collect from flying around the zone. I like that. That's neat. I like that a weekly champion gear piece is obtainable from doing them, mostly because it means my orcs can get their heroic tier set transmogs from these events. As long as I remember to upgrade the pieces before I put them in the catalyst, I always forget to do that. There's a currency vendor with some fun rewards on, although nothing as extensive as the Time Rift vendors. And you can get currency by doing world quests and elites in the zone. To be honest, it's kind of impossible to judge these events properly on the PTR, because on there, it's just you doing all of it by yourself and it takes ages. And they're really designed for like 100 people all doing them at the same time. But from what I have played, I would say Dreamsurges aren't the most fun example of Dragonflight's most trusted open world gameplay type thing, which doesn't mean they're bad necessarily. It just means they're not as goofy and joyous as Time Rifts. They're not as balls out, explodey Michael-based spectacle as Suffusion Camps, and they're not as Moorish, like just one last boss kind of thing as flying around the Forbidden Reach picking off elites was. I suspect there's probably an element of us hitting open world fill the bar fatigue on these events now as well, although I will be thrilled to be proven wrong. And in fairness, Dragonflight has a really good track record in proving me wrong and being way better than I ever expected. This is a really good expansion, so I think I'm going to hold off being a complete dick about Dreamsurges until they're at least up and running. For me, one of the real main events of any patch is always going to be story stuff, which in 10.1.7's case, we have not been able to test. We know that there is the return of the Scarlet Monastery in some capacity, something that we picked up on towards the end of Shadowlands when those updated maps were sneaked into the data. Will it end up being part of Secrets of Azeroth or a more permanent addition to the game, like the updated Sholomance stuff in 10.1.5? And don't forget, whatever story is going to be connected to the Night Elf and Forsaken heritage quest lines too, because frankly, it's going to be quite important. I'll admit, these are two Heritage Armor quest lines I've been dreading because they've got a lot of work to do. A huge part of the player base expects them to basically go some way to resolving the massive upheaval that both these races have been going through since, well, forever, but specifically BFA. The Forsaken job seems a bit more straightforward of the two, seeing as they've already reclaimed Lordaeron and started rebuilding at the end of Shadowlands. But as a faction, they are very much in a transition stage, really looking to discover where they go next. You'd hope that at the very least we'd see how the new council's getting settled. And also, even though you suspect a lot of emphasis will be on the undead moving on from the shadow of Sylvanas, you kind of can't have a Forsaken heritage questline without Sylvanas, can you? Can you? The existence of both the Forsaken Champions tabard and the Queen's Loyalist tabard suggests perhaps not. The Night Elf questline, the Night Elf questline, has a much bigger challenge, with anything less than the repopulating of Teldrassil likely to be seen as an abject elf-hating failure by players, to the extent where, honestly, if it was up to me, I'd probably completely ignore any progression of the Night Elf plight in these heritage quests at all. All the new tree stuff, all the new Night Elf home stuff, Malfurion's return, the Teldrassil Night Elf souls finding peace, Tyrande finally getting to relax, all that stuff, leave for 10.2. Make that mainline plot and just have the heritage quests be either a celebration of the many facets of the race itself, like the brilliant recent Orc heritage quests, or of the player's journey playing that race, like the human heritage quests. Difficult without Teldrassil, granted. Okay, make it like the Orc ones then. Yay! There's always a lot lot of interesting talk around these heritage quests when they launch, and I do think those last couple that I mentioned was some of the best yet. So yeah, hopes are high for this and the rest of Fury Incarnate in general. As always, there are links to our favourite Wowhead articles of the week in the description of this video that will tell you loads more about everything we've talked about here and tell you how to win Unguro Crater though. You want to win Unguro Crater, right? There is, though, something else that I wanted to talk about today, or someone else. Chris Metzen. Yes, the Chris Metzen. Christ Metzen, the Metzmeister, Mr. Warcraft himself. And if you think I'm exaggerating for comic effect here, then you're right, but also kind of not. Chris is one of the all-time old-school legends of Blizzard, and in particular, Warcraft, having basically come up with the entire lore and history of Azeroth in a couple of afternoons, and probably being the main driving charismatic force of this entire pretend world that we're all so familiar with and protective of. Thousands of pairs of hands have shaped Azeroth over the years, but I think it's fair to say Chris Metzen is as close as you're ever going to come to finding a face for it. And maybe best of all, unlike all the other old school legends of Blizzard, he didn't even have to leave quietly in disgrace after the harassment scandal, so that's great too. It's okay to love Chris Metzen, thank f***. Let's be balanced. There was that really embarrassing tweet where he pretended to basically not know Alex Afrasiabi. That didn't look good, but you know what? Literally everyone to a man that I know who has worked at Blizz or does work at Blizz now, including people that I genuinely trust and admire, have only 100% good things to say about Chris Metzen in private, and that's good enough for me. It's okay to love Chris Metzen, which is good because, as we all know, he's back. In December last year, John Haidt delivered what many in the community considered an early Christmas present, with the news that, after stepping away from Blizzard due to exhaustion and stress a couple of years previously, Chris Metzen was returning to the fold as a creative advisor on the Warcraft team. We all remember this, right? We all remember how happy everyone was with this. Laughing and crying and all the things with joy. OMG, that's great news for Warcraft, actually. Best news, best news, best news. I can't stop saying holy shit. I try not to be too hyped, but god damn! It was a simp show, obviously. It felt big, and it was big. Players were hyped, WoW devs were hyped, happy days. As the dust settled on that though, and as we haven't really seen much of Chris since then, I wouldn't be surprised if a majority of you started to think the whole Chris thing being back was maybe kind of like a little bit symbolic rather than especially influential. Kind of like, okay, you know how in football or whatever sport you pretend not to like because you're too cool and nerdy? You know when there's a club legend who retires and then the club invite them to hang around the place in an ambassador role, just like being a legend. So Liverpool will chuck a few quid at Ian Rush to turn up at Anfield on match day, and he'll just hang out in the executive bar, chatting to VIPs, posing for photos, and just be Ian Rush. And that's cool for him because he hasn't got much else to do, and it's cool for Liverpool and their fans because it's a tangible link to the glorious past, a consistency which just makes everyone feel better. It's good for morale, and that is how I imagine this. Chris Metzen would come in every month, and Steve Danusa and Ian Hazakostas would talk him through their plans for the game and what was coming up, and he'd be like, dudes, that sounds awesome. Don't forget Thrall is awesome and needs more lines. Geek is. And then he'd go home, happy that he's having input into the world he basically created. Ian and Steve are happy because it's still basically just their thing, and all the players are happy because Metzen is just, like, there, and that's got to be better than him not being there. That's just the impression that I got from John's tweet and the lack of visible Chris Metzen thereafter. But internet, I don't say this very often, but I'm saying it now. It turns out I was wrong. I was incredibly wrong. Last week, ex-Blizzard co-leader and current Just Blizzard leader, Mike Ybarra, one of us, tweeted this. We sent some lucky Blizzard team members to the hashtag Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert in LA. Hope they had a blast. At Chris Metzen and myself and some Blizzard folks will see hashtag Metallica, and I can't wait. We have some very exciting at Warcraft news that at Chris Metzen and the at Windstalker, that's producer Holly Longsdale, will show you all hashtag BlizzCon this year. I can't wait. I'm more excited about WoW's future than ever before. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot going on in this tweet, and first of all, Mike, I'm sorry, This is 2 tweets, okay? The first half and the second half have literally nothing to do with each other, and talk about burying the lead. This is like if I tweeted out, had hashtag pizza for dinner on Friday, it was stuffed crust, had a blast. At Evitel and I are thinking of having hashtag tacos tomorrow, hashtag yum, hashtag taco life. Our new baby was born on Tuesday. At Evitel and Child both doing well, and I'm super excited to see what hashtag new baby grows up to be. But whatever, okay, here is Mike telling us that hashtag Chris Metzen will be the one revealing WoW's future, what we all expect to be a new expansion at BlizzCon in November. And on the face of it, you might not think this really changes anything. If Metzen were back on the WoW team in that ambassador role, then honestly, an absolute banger of a BlizzCon presentation is kind of what you'd imagine his main duties would be. You don't get Chris Metzen back on the team and not get him to do the BlizzCon presentation. It's what the man was born for. It would be like getting Slash in your band and putting him on clarinet. It would be like inviting Katie Hopkins to your birthday party and not letting her say anything racist. What's the point? There's just something about this tweet that seemed a little bit more than that to me. And internet, I'm going to tell you something I've heard. So the thing is, as you know, obviously we've been doing this job long enough now that we know quite a few people that work at Blizzard, and on Team 2 who make WoW in particular. Some in friendly passing, and some who we love and consider genuine friends. And naturally, we hear stuff. Often it's stuff that we would never dream of repeating because it's said in trust, or by mistake, or simply because, honestly, hearing something off of one person and reporting it isn't very responsible, frankly. It could just be wrong. People are wrong a lot. But then sometimes, not very often, we hear the same kind of thing from a few different people independently. Maybe just offhand, throwaway. They say it in a way that doesn't suggest it's really a secret, and no one has actually told us anything at all. But altogether, a picture of something forms, and this is one of those things. Because the impression that I get is that Chris Metzen is actually a far bigger part of the WoW team than any of us originally thought. That actually, far from being a symbolic retired thoroughbred that gets wheeled out on special occasions, he is a fundamental part of the current leadership of World of Warcraft. I have heard that Chris Metzen, Ian Haskostis, and Steve Danusa spend huge amounts of time in a room with each other, just throwing ideas round. Not the two who actually work on WoW, running their plans by the old boss, but with Chris as an equal and important part of the process. I have heard that Chris Metzen gives regular and incredibly detailed updates to the rest of Team 2 on their plans that they are working on. The impression I get is that when Chris Metzen stands on stage with the crowd in the palm of his hand, revealing whatever WoW has to reveal at BlizzCon, it won't be just as a face, but as someone who has been at the very heart of creating whatever is revealed. Which, for the Mets heads among us, is going to be a very exciting thought indeed. Because it's Chris Metzen! He shaped and formed Azeroth like a titan. He conceptualized Vanilla and TBC and Wrath and Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria and WoD. And yeah, in the early days, some of the story threads and plot beats are about as deep as you'd expect from a dude in his 20s without like a ton of outside experience of other cultures. And there is that weird habit of using SA as a plot device, especially when it comes to dragons. But Chris Metzen was half the age I am now when he wrote that shit. I like to think I've matured since then. It's fair to acknowledge that he has too. And if he truly, really is back in the swing of things, and I think he is, could this be a return to whatever the glory days of WoW are supposed to have been? I mean, I don't know. If we're talking about hype, then yeah. I don't know if there's a man alive who is as good at building hype and good feelings towards a video game than Chris Metzen. Whatever he reveals, it is gonna feel awesome, as much because it's him doing it as anything else. And there's a lot to be said for that, you know? That's a good thing. I also think it's overall a really great thing for the team. By all accounts, Metzen is one of the most inspiring and charismatic leaders in the industry. And for a team of devs, mostly made up at this point of people who played WoW as kids or young adults and then became devs specifically to work on this game in many cases, yeah, I think suddenly working on that game with Chris Metzen is going to be brilliant for them. And the more inspired and happy the dev team, the better the chances that the game is good. Which is why you should pay them properly and not crunch and allow work from home, by the way. It makes good games. And I gotta say as well, Imagine being Steve Danusa now. Imagine having gone through the amount of shit that guy has gone through in the last couple of years, half the time for decisions that were made long before he was even in charge of anything. And imagine now having that cast iron protection of having all your narrative choices in the game being Chris Metzen approved. What a relief that's going to be. So yeah, all in all, it is good for the energy and feeling and quality around World of Warcraft. There is a part of me that thinks it's a bit of a shame this has happened in Dragonflight of all expansions, because right now, in my opinion, this is not a game in need of reinvention. Dragonflight is the reinvention, and it's a really good one. We are in the middle of a top drawer, A grade, genuinely one of the best expansions ever right now, and I hope the philosophy and joy behind it is enhanced by Chris's presence rather than replaced. Does that make sense? One thing I do know, and I can tell you for sure, the people who work on WoW are very excited about his presence and input, and all the things they've been cooking up for the future of WoW, and that alone is enough to make me very excited too. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this episode, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all of our work happen, and genuinely thank you guys, because without you there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. Evie wasn't in this episode, as you may have noticed, but she does join me on Twitch Monday, Wednesday and Thursday as we co-stream more Baldur's Gate 3, and we're aiming to get another test episode of the podcast out this week too. Here's hoping. If you didn't like the show today, downvote the shit out of it, and remember, my name is Boklahoma. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheers.